So I just finished the manga series Gantz, and dear God was it something. I didn't know much about Gantz when I first picked it up. All I really knew was that it was violent, gory, and had some dope artwork. And I'd say it definitely contained all of that, even a bit too much of it at certain times. For those who don't know, Gantz is a seinen manga series created by Hiroya Oku, published during the mid-2000s, when it was prime time to experiment with 3D CGI, and Gantz contains quite a bit of it, albeit looking pretty off-putting for its time. In simple terms, Gantz is a story about two teenagers who die in a train accident, only to find themselves in a room with others, and a big black ball in the middle. They're told by the ball to go kill some aliens and given weapons, and that's about it. But in complex terms, this is a story that contains graphic violence, gore and viscera, titties on every other page, sci-fi weaponry, aliens, telekinesis, vampires, and talking dinosaurs for God's sake. And I loved all of it. Well, most of it. And that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm here to rank all the Gantz arcs from worst to best. I think these ranking videos are always fun to watch, and it can be entertaining to see how terrible some random person's ideas are about a shared interest you have, so hopefully I can do the same. Of course, this is all my opinion, as it should be clear, but I quite literally finished the story about a few weeks ago, so I think my opinion is pretty accurate if I say so myself. So, I'm going to be classifying an arc in Gantz based off the mission to which the Gantz team was sent to. This arc will cover everything up until the next mission has started, so just a heads up on that. Also, another heads up, this is going to contain massive spoilers for all of Gantz and all of the arcs. So, whether you've read Gantz, you haven't read it, fair warning. If you simply don't care about spoilers, go ahead and just keep enjoying the video, I guess. So, starting at the worst arc in the series is the Catastrophe arc, or the alien invasion, the final arc basically. I'm sorry, but this arc is just disappointing and long. Holy Jesus, this arc is nearly 100 chapters. It basically makes up the entire third act of the story, and it just gets way too ahead of itself. Alright, let's start with the good stuff because there isn't much here. I think the beginning of this arc is pretty great. The initial invasion is pretty intense, and I think the mystery of who these invaders are is what makes the start so great. We're only shown ginormous mech Gundam robots blowing stuff up and an extreme amount of death on humanity's side. The mothership and its incomprehensible size are just astounding, and Oku shows off some of his best artwork in the series. The sheer terror of humanity essentially being nothing but cattle and sustenance for these aliens is horrifying and reminds me of something like War of the Worlds. I also do find the concept of K having a clone of himself pretty unique, and I was actually a much bigger fan of his clone than the original. Too bad he got popped into jelly. But that's besides the point. Okay, that was about it. On to the stuff that I don't like. You know how I said this arc has some of the best panels and artwork? Well, it also has some of the worst. Mind you, I read the majority of Gantz as online scans and not physical copies. But sweet God almighty, can I barely tell what is happening in most of these fights. Oku draws the mech suits and aliens with so much dark black shading, you can't even tell who's fighting who, or where anybody is on the panel. This isn't necessarily just a problem with this arc, as I've noticed it is kind of a recurring problem throughout the story, but it's the worst here. Moving on, the big bad aliens just being giants with only slightly different bodily features from humans, besides having 3 dicks, is pretty lame. I can say for certain that the giants are the lamest alien designs in the entire manga, which is kind of sad when this is the main threat for the majority of the story. I also found the controversial Truth Room segment to be interesting at best. Gantz has had deep themes in its storytelling, mainly about how human life may seem insignificant compared to the rest of the universe, and how we are just 1 in 8 billion people, but it's always been a bit subtle about it, most times at least. The idea of one's life being more important than another can be a complex theme, and we've seen it hinted at throughout other missions. But Gantz pulls all the subtlety away during the end, and flat out says that all human life is insignificant. The so-called God aliens at the end mention how they sent blueprints to Earth to protect them from aliens, yet at the same time, they don't care for human life at all and see them as nothing but dust and particles? Then why did you protect them? Gantz may be nihilistic, but this is just way too out there and leaves nothing to mystery. Well, except the mystery of where the hell these creatures came from, the origin of the signal they sent, nothing important, obviously. This arc was just painful to read due to its combination of length, and the majority of this arc just being Kay and Tay screaming each other's names over and over and over again. This is definitely how you write a romance, people. Take some notes. There's a bit more I could get into, such as Tay having stronger plot armor than a shonen protagonist, Reika having a basically off-screen death, along with Nishi, come on, man. And the unnecessary fight with the big bad giant boss at the end, because, well, what's the point? The humans already won. Oh, and the vampires. You guys remember the vampires? Yeah. They were a thing, I guess. Would have been cool if they had meaningful plot relevance. But at least we got a small panel of them at the end, so that means they have substance, right? Look, I'm not saying this arc ruined all of Gantz. It didn't. I love Gantz a lot. I think this is a great story. But unfortunately, this is just one of the weakest endings to a story I've ever read. And it's a damn shame. With that being said, the next arc I gotta go with is the Tanaka alien mission. Now look, this arc started off super awesome. The alien robots themselves had this really uncanny design and presence around them. Watching their expression go from its normal grin to wide-eyed, hateful stare intent on killing was creepy as hell. The characters had to tiptoe around these robots, never knowing what action or word would send them into an unbridled rage. All great stuff at the start, really. The reveal of the alien birds hiding inside these robots was beautifully disgusting. I loved it. But what put this arc below the others for me is mainly the end of it. While the reveal of the big bird boss is pretty intense with Kay in the house all by himself, the final fight is pretty lame. The bird picks up Kay, and he shoots it. And that's about it. End of mission. It's just kind of a lame way to end what was a pretty fair arc. And Nishi's death was very surprising and probably the best part of this arc though. Alright, so I already hate to do this because I really do love this arc, but the next arc I gotta put is the Onion Alien Mission arc. The very first arc of the story. I truly do love this part, and the best thing I can say about it, it is the only arc in the entire story that I could see being the first. This arc would not work if it was switched with any other. And that's what's great about it. It is the perfect first mission for the story. The Onion Alien is a pretty tame alien in comparison to every other we see come across in the story, but it's absolutely terrifying as the first. We as readers, along with our hunters, are still confused at what's even happening, yet intrigued at the same time. We get properly introduced to our main boys, Kay and Kato. And while Kay starts off as a little shit in the story, and actually is quite easy to hate, we still end up somewhat rooting for him, or at least we're supposed to. We get some iconic moments with this mission, such as Kay activating his suit for the first time, jumping down the colossal set of stairs, and Kato being nearly killed, all in the first mission. But the reason I put this arc here on the list next has got to be for a few small things. The crew of fighters on this mission are all kind of stupid, and you pretty much hate all of them, especially these two. The only ones who do anything here are Kay and Kato, which I understand makes sense for the story, but it doesn't mean that it was as fun to read as the other missions. Also, it is sad to see the Onion Kid die. He didn't do anything wrong. Oh boy, I feel like I'm now at the point where people really might start to disagree. But I'm putting the Ring Alien / Tay mission arc next. So the Ring Alien the group fights, or ring aliens, hence there's two of them. Yeah, it lasted quite literally one chapter, which is such a damn shame because these guys look dope as shit and I wish we could have seen more of them. They remind me of the tree sentinel enemies from Elden Ring. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? While the group easily dispatches these guys, the main focal point of this arc is centered around killing Tei Kojima. This was a huge moment in Gantz, as it was the first and only time we see a human being targeted. This was extremely interesting and forced the group at the time to make a choice. Kill Tei and pass the mission, or leave her alive and sacrifice all the points everyone had earned so far. We have Kei leading one side of the group, obviously in favor of keeping her alive, and Izumi leading the other half in favor of killing. And speaking of Izumi, my god, do I have a bit to say on this guy. But I'll get into that later. This arc was enjoyable because of how different it was. You're left wondering, why is Gantz doing this? Does he have some specific vendetta against Kei or Tei? Is it because Tei knew of Gantz's existence? It was sad to see the group turn on each other and Izumi deal the killing blow against Tei, dying in Kei's arms. This was all great stuff to read, but the criticism I have with this arc is we never really fully understand why Tei was targeted. Yes, you can say it's because she knew of Gantz's reality, but the manga never lets us know this 100%. And regardless, does it matter that she would have known? I mean, just a few arcs later, Gantz reveals the hunters to the rest of the world. Why did he care now? As I said earlier also, I wish the ring aliens were more than just a single chapter long. I just feel like this chapter needed a little extra flair to finish it off. I don't know. Let's move on. Up next is the Dinosaur mission arc. Okay, so I'm kind of noticing a trend with a lot of these missions I've gone over so far, which is that they all have banger starts, but just don't have a crazy ending. And I think this arc suffers from the same fate. It has an awesome start, but to me doesn't have the greatest ending. This is the mission that introduces us to what would be our main cast of characters after Izumi kind of, committed mass murder on hundreds as blackface. Yeah, I'm not making this up, this is actually what he did, and it shocked me to read. But, moving on, this arc starts off pretty strong, you know? We got a bunch of velociraptors coming to attack, good old Muscle Rider starts beating the shit out of them, while Sakurai and Sakata use their ESP to blow shit up inside of them. And as much as I hate Izumi, I gotta admit that him extending his sword to slice the dinosaurs in half is pretty badass. Izumi is like a weird, edgier version of Sephiroth. That's how I always perceived him in this story. I don't know, they kind of look similar. Maybe that's just me. Whatever. As I said, this arc introduces us to our main cast of characters like Reika, the old man, Inaba, everybody's here. This arc also introduces us to the Gantz bike, which would later become quite popular in future arcs, and starts off pretty intense, with Gantz signifying to Kei that if he doesn't get enough points in this mission, he'll be killed. Now this was another questionable moment from Gantz, as we had learned from the arc preceding this one, which I'll get into later, that as long as you survive the time limit, you will be spared, albeit losing your points in the process. So this was a first for the story. But furthermore, the Triceratops and T-Rex shooting laser balls from their mouth and killing each other is pretty metal, so I gotta give them points for that. I did find the Brontosaurus as the final boss to be kinda silly, with him just flinging his neck all around to try to hit Kei. But it once again ends with Kei finishing it off. This chapter also introduces us to the vampires, which, I'll admit, had a pretty badass introduction, but as I said before, it's a damn shame the vampire side plot went nowhere. Oh well. Alright, we got one of my personal favorite arcs in this manga, being the Italian arc, baby. I love this arc so much. This is such a fun and enjoyable arc for all the wrong reasons. Now, first of all, really the only downside to this arc is how short it is. It's only about 4 to 5 chapters long, if I recall, but god is it action-packed and chaotic. Not only that, but it's a dreadful arc. I mean, this mission is just depressing. Our main Tokyo team are actually not the main team to fight in this mission. They're called for backup. Yeah, shit gets out of hand real quick. Right from the get-go, this mission is chaotic. The team comes across multiple dead bodies splattered against the pavement and walks into the absolute carnage that is the Italian aliens' attack on the Gantz members. And can I just say that I absolutely love the design of these creatures? I know they're just based on Renaissance statues in Italy itself, but that's what makes them so blatantly cool. It's something that, in a way, you can believe is real. And those little angel baby aliens, yeah, Jesus, those things scare me. I mean, just look at them. Oof. We do lose a few familiar faces in this fight, unfortunately, with the old man being picked up and getting his limbs ripped apart by said alien baby angels. Quite the tragedy. At least Inaba finally gets his redemption arc, yet just as he inherits enough courage, he's utterly curb stomped out of the story. This arc no doubt gives us some of the best panels in all of Gantz, and the only negative thing I can say about this arc is that I just wish it was longer, and perhaps a bit more in depth. Then again, its short-lived nature kind of makes its mysterious nature all the more enticing. Now personally, I think this is going to be the most controversial spot, but I might be wrong. It's the Shorty alien arc. Now, this arc is coming off another arc, which I'll also be talking about later, that was really good. So it had a lot to live up to and a lot of hype to drive off. This is the arc that defines Kei's character moving forward. He's left all alone, having lost everyone who was close to him and given no time to rest. He's sent into a new mission, all by himself. Absolutely no one is with him, which is the only time in the series we see this happen. Kei is sent to kill the Shorty alien, as defined by Gantz. Only bringing 2 X-guns with him, Kei is sent to a rooftop with a single alien opposed to him. Kei dispatches the alien shortly after, only to find nearly a dozen more have arrived. The aliens actually start to speak to Kei, telepathically of course, threatening and intimidating him all the while. Now, one reason I love this arc so much is that Kei is kind of portrayed as the bad guy here. He makes the first move against the alien, which in turn kills it, and the other aliens simply want to honor and avenge their fallen comrade. They actually berate Kei for attacking them when they did nothing to him in the first place. Now you can make the case that all Gantz hunters have no quarrel with any of the aliens. They are simply sent out, against their will, to carry out these missions. Many times throughout Gantz, we see the hunters question why they are doing this, when they have, as I said, no quarrel with any of the aliens. And you of course could defend the aliens' interpretation, that they were doing nothing wrong. However, I think this time around, Kei was undoubtedly harboring hatred for alien life. After the previous arc, there's no doubt about it. And while Kei actually fails to kill all the aliens in this mission, having one left to survive, he's sent back home with all his points lost. Now, this is very interesting. Kei continues to go to school, and we meet important characters such as Tei and Izumi. We learn that Izumi was a former Gantz member. Nishi had created a website around the mystery of the Gantz balls, and Kei was dared to ask out Tei. How nice. But the most intriguing part of this arc is that this is the first and only time, once again, that an alien attacks humankind outside of a mission, besides the final arc, but let's pretend it doesn't exist right now. The Shorty alien starts by getting inside Kei's head, continuing to taunt him relentlessly, to the point where Kei starts to fear for his own life. This eventually turns into the alien invading and massacring Kei's class, leaving all but Izumi and Tei dead. While I find what the alien did to innocent teenagers abhorrent, in a way, I can understand why it did it. Kind of. In its eyes, it carried out the same actions that Kei did. This is what I love about this arc so much. It's really the first arc in Gantz to question the morality of what the Gantz hunters have been doing all this time. All missions up to this point have started with the Gantz hunters making the first move against the aliens, in turn, causing the fights to happen. This manga has a huge theme about the existence of life, and if one species deserves to live over another. This arc does a way better job at displaying that than the final arc does, in my opinion. As mentioned earlier, this arc really shows Kei's maturity come to life, as he goes to save Tei, a girl he barely knows at this point, when he so easily could have walked away. As all things come to an end though, so does this arc, and Kei shoots the alien head on in defending Tei. Even the end of this arc is amazing, because right before the alien dies, it stops its attack midway through, just to stare at Kei, knowing full well what's about to happen to him, only for seconds later to explode. It's a face that Kei doesn't forget easily. This arc is amazing, and I really don't have anything negative to say, just simply that the next arcs are even better. So now we arrive at the top 3, and I think it was pretty obvious that these last 3 arcs I've yet to mention are the top ones. All 3 of these next arcs are just incredible in their own manner, with some just being a bit more enjoyable than the other. That being said, the third best arc in Gantz is the Oni alien mission arc. I mean, come on, what can I say that people haven't already said about this arc? It's fast-paced, creative, and has some crazy twists all contained in one story arc. I mean, there's just so much that happens here. Remember how I said that the past arcs in Gantz started off strong but ended poorly? Well, I'm taking all that back for the next 3 arcs I talk about, because all 3 of these lead up to some wild moments in the series. So starting with the aliens themselves, the first ones we see are disguised as humans, which is the only alien type in the series, besides the Tanaka alien's poor attempt of disguise, as a human. Their true form is revealed, which reminds me a lot of the creatures from Parasite, which I totally dig. However, these aliens are no laughing matter, as they're one of the few in the series to be able to shapeshift, appearing as a child, botfly, and a freaking elephant. I mean, holy hell. This arc sees the group being split up between the Tokyo team. Quite a bit of misdirection is seen throughout this arc, almost playing into a who can you trust imposter among us type of game. With the Oni aliens being able to shapeshift, they easily transform into other humans such as Kurono and Reika. Speaking of which, this is the first, yet disappointingly not the last time we see a human have sex with an alien, just a fair warning. So there's that. But in all seriousness, this is truly the first arc in the series where we see our main cast of Gantz members work together flawlessly to take out the aliens. Even the vampires interrupt to fight, posing quite a significant threat to Sakata and Sakurai, to which Sakurai actually dies in this arc. Another thing I love about Gantz is while really anybody can be brought back in the story, it also means that no one is safe either. Just as easily as someone can be brought back, someone can be killed as well. This arc has what might be my favorite ending to any arc, with the Gantz hunters finally being revealed to the world, the Oni boss being defeated, and not only was Sakurai brought back, but Tei, Kato, and Nishi of all people were as well. While I found it kind of annoying Kei was gone from the story for a small point onwards after this part, this arc was a well-deserved win for our main cast after too much tragedy. The number 2 spot, and a very close pick with being my number 1, goes to the Osaka arc. Now, this entire arc could really be its own self-contained story, and it's no surprise that a CGI movie was made about this arc alone, changing the story just slightly to make it work a little bit better as a film. Seriously, if you've never seen Gantz O and have read Gantz, or even if you haven't, it's on Netflix, go watch it, it's actually really well adapted. But this arc has everything. A great protagonist faced with challenge and sacrifice, a love interest to provide aid for the main character, new characters to be introduced to the audience and to get brutally killed off, and a terrifying villain for us to root against. There's so much to love here, so let me dive into it. This is the only arc in which Kurono isn't here, and Kato serves as our main character. I already love this because Kato is my favorite character in Gantz. He may not go through as much development as Kurono does, but he is a great role model and serves as a vessel for other characters to grow, such as Kurono himself. Hell, even the nerd character goes through a mini development because of Kato. He's just an all-around great guy. Now, the mission finds the Tokyo team in Osaka, hunting the Neurarchion alien. I hope I pronounced that right. This isn't the first time the group has come across other players before, but this arc is really where it's heavily imputed. We're shown that the Osaka team is violent, brutal, uncaring of life, whether it be human or alien, and simply doesn't care what anyone thinks of them. This is a stark contrast to the Tokyo team, who have always cared for each other's well-being, especially in the previous arc when all of them worked together to take down the Oni. And while the Osaka team may be intimidating and very edgy, they don't mess around. Osaka is filled to the brim with alien life, an amount unprecedented to anything we've seen prior, and the Osaka team dispatched dozens of them without hesitation. The Tokyo team is left bewildered at the sheer chaos the Osaka team provides. And speaking of the aliens, wow, does this arc have some of the coolest alien designs, right next to the Italian aliens. You can see the heavy inspiration of Japanese yokai had on Oku when he was writing Gantz, as that's the majority of these alien creatures in this arc. Whether it be a giant rolling head, an upright slithery serpent thing, a minotaur with spider appendages, or whatever the hell this is, the aliens here don't waste your time. They're terrifying in all the right places. While the first half of this arc is mostly here to show off the alien designs, the second half is where it shines. Kato crosses paths with a girl from the Osaka team, who believes he's not who he appears or acts to be. Kato is confused, of course, but she states how she doesn't really think he's here to help others, and if he is, then it's simply a waste of time. Now, we know Kato actually is here to help, as it's a fundamental state of his character. The girl's name is Anzu, a mother to her own child, and she's not much older than Kato is. She's witness to Kato helping multiple civilians, shocked he would ever go so far to protect the innocent. More characters are given screen time, along with two of the vampires who hitched a ride to the mission. They're here to initially team up with the aliens, but the aliens quickly turn on them and leave them to their own will. And not only are they given screen time, but so are new members of the Osaka team, with these three guys who are shown whose names I simply can't remember. But this is another thing I love about this arc. There's so much going on, but it's done at a healthy and a reasonable pace. Nothing at all like the final arc. When the main boss alien and his two minions are shown, we learn the boss himself is worth 100 points, and two members of the Osaka team go hunting them. This part of the story is awesome, with the nerdy guy just running around with the alien head shooting lasers beams from its eyes everywhere, and him screaming and freaking out. It's just great. This arc is incredibly important for introducing new weapons such as the Z-guns and the Gantz mechs, which would be a staple for the story later on. At the end of this arc, when most of the Osaka team has been wiped out and the Tokyo team is being hunted, we do get the death of Sakata, which was a bit unfortunate. What he says before he dies, though, is very interesting and something I think most forget about. He tells Sakurai to not revive him, no matter what. He's seen his friends die over and over and be revived for quite some time, and believes that the value of a human and their soul loses its value over time. He doesn't want the same fate to fall on him. As hard as it is for the group to come to see these terms, he has a fair point. Every time you're revived, you're just another clone of yourself. At what point do you lose your soul, or lose the very thing that made you human? Is there ever a limit? It's also quite interesting considering that the character Kei Kurono, his name was made to be Kurono to sound like clone. It was an intentional choice from the start of the story. But anyway, Sakata dies while using his ESP to hold off the boss to protect his loved ones. And after the boss transforms into his final form, this horrifying demon-looking thing, he proclaims he'll finish off Kato and the others after he finishes off the Osaka team. It is here where we get what is my favorite panel in Gantz, when the alien returns with him holding the torso of a dead hunter, pointing its finger out to Kato's head. And it is here where Kato asks the question, why are we fighting? It's such an important yet simple question that is yet to really be answered, and we finally have it here. This panel, where no words are even spoken, speaks 1,000 words. I think this panel really explains Gantz well. Imagine yourself as a 17-year-old kid, thrown into a world of unimaginable cosmic monster horror, and you're standing face to face with this. It's horrifying. When the alien explains that it's sort of like being a god in the sense of why they fight, its limbs are suddenly blown off. Kato's nearly killed, Anzu dies protecting him, and the vampires swoop in for the killing blow against the boss. When the mission finally ends, and the few survivors are brought back, Kado uses the 100 points he earned to revive Kurono. A satisfying end to an intensely incredible arc. Here we are at the number 1 spot. You know what's left. It's the Buddha Alien Mission arc. I've seen a lot of people compare this arc to the Eclipse of Berserk, and I've got to say, I agree. Also, it's pretty cool that people who read Berserk also read Gantz. Berserk is like super good. Go read it also. But anyway, this is the arc that takes Gantz from being, at worst, a mildly interesting story shoehorned with gore and sex, to a tragic yet scary ordeal of twists and turns and death at every corner that catches you off guard. This is the 3rd arc chronologically in Gantz, and by this point, Kurono and Kado have vastly different views on Gantz. Kurono has felt that his life is pretty mundane and meaningless, and after killing the Tanaka bird boss and wanting to win over Kishimoto, he's thrilled to return back to the room. Although, the same can't be said for Kado, who after just saving up enough money for him and his younger brother to move out from a toxic family, is called back into the game. The goals and aspirations of these two couldn't be further apart. This time in the Gantz room, we see a colorful cast of characters. A Buddhist monk, a gun enthusiast, a martial artist, and a trained sniper are all part of this game. Kurono and Kado are well aware of how Gantz works by now, and try to convince the others to put their suits on. It has little effect, as the monk believes they've all died and been sent to the afterlife. This, in turn, leads most of the members to not wear their suits, which will have quite the drastic effect on their lives down the line. Gantz sends them to fight the Rowdy Alien and Grumpy Alien, who in turn are just aliens posing as Buddhist statues. You see, in this mission, Kurono has gained an extreme amount of confidence. Yeah, he's still kind of a dick, but he's getting better and better. While Kurono looked up to Kado's heroic nature, it's what pushes him to take up the mantle of heroism and charge headstrong at the aliens. Of course, casualties are inevitable, and the monk is killed, which I find ironic that he himself was Buddhist and was killed by the Buddhist aliens. Kinda funny. Now remember, this is only the 3rd arc, and we haven't even hit our main characters yet. We're still following Kurono, Kado, Kishimoto, the sexy guy with the black hair whose name I can't remember, and the girl that openly had sex with Kurono because Kurono is still a loser and had to basically ask nicely for it. You know, all the important characters. Oh, and there's the dog. Now, the casualties are pretty minimum for about the first 2/3 of this arc, but like I said earlier, shit's about to hit the fan real quick. Once the team dispatches the first 2 aliens, multiple ground ones, and the ginormous one, they're all confused as to why the mission hasn't ended yet. There is nothing left in sight for them. The group splits up to investigate, and some of them find one more statue. This wasn't nearly as intimidating as the previous one, so dispatching it should be fairly easy. But that's simply not what happens. The alien kills everyone in the room, which becomes quite the shock to us and the others. Kado and Kishimoto go in for an attack, but Kado is drawn into a stalemate. He can't land any significant damage. And besides, any damage that is done to the alien is ineffective, as it easily regenerates its limbs and injuries like nothing happened. Kanon is this creature's name, and with it is 26 arms, all carrying a variety of tools to use for its disposal. A vial of acid, swords, miniature pagodas, laser beams, and an artifact allowing its regeneration. While Kanon does not speak, nor make any facial gestures, he gives us more horror than any other alien we've seen so far. Kurono joins the fight, with a leap forward intending to kill. In the process, though, half his limbs are blown up. Kanon targets Kado next, throwing a glob of acid toward him. It's here where Kishimoto absorbs the damage instead, and her lower half melts off her body in the process, all while in Kado's arms. Things have gone from bad to worse in a mere instant. Kanon then starts killing more of the hunters, and even kills our beloved sniper after he goes in for a failed sneak attack. God, I loved this guy. If he had stayed alive for future missions, he would have been so helpful. But anyway, Sei, or the Lara Croft looking girl, plans to fight Kanon all alone, but is also killed in the process. The last one left is Kato. While Kato does end up getting the upper hand, Kanon begins to climb out of its shell and begins speaking. Kanon had digested the brain of one of the hunters, and asked why the hunters started to attack them when they did nothing to them. Kato is too focused and enraged to answer, and ignores the question. After getting his ass severely handed to him, Kato is able to make a surprise attack against Kanon, slicing his head clean off. Kato had done this for Kishimoto, Kei, and especially his younger brother. He would finally get to return home. That is, until the alien, in one last effort, stabs its tail through Kato's chest. When the transfer begins, Kei is the only one to arrive. No Kishimoto, no Sei, and no Kato. He is truly and utterly alone. Wow, what a depressing arc. I know I went into more detail with these past few arcs than the previous ones, but it's because I want you to really understand the scope and meaning behind these missions. Gantz is not afraid to kill off its characters, and this arc would prove it to be a staple. If you read Gantz, then by this point, you started to become attached to Kurono and Kato. Hell, maybe you even liked Kishimoto. I'll be honest, I didn't. She served almost no purpose and was intended to just basically be a sex object for Kurono, and there was way better female characters written far better than her, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Throughout the story, hell, even the manga and chapter covers, we were to believe nothing major would happen to these characters, at least for a while. But no, everyone is killed, except for one. This arc was enticing, it hooked you in, and let you know it was not afraid to crank it up. And that is why this is my personal favorite arc. I can definitely understand if you like the Osaka or Oni arc more, but whenever I think back to what instantly got me hooked on Gantz, it was this mission. So much dread and terror is filled here, and while Kurono may have survived and the aliens were killed, this was no victory. One last thing to talk about here, and this is how this arc changes our main character. Before, and even somewhat during this arc, Kurono was a selfish, low-life teenager who cared for no one but himself. I remember when I first started reading Gantz, I truly hated Kurono. I thought he was the worst main character in any manga I had read, and it led me to rooting for Kato and hoping to see Kurono fail. And this is because, before this arc, Kurono had nothing to fight for, nothing to live for. He was an outcast, had no friends, and thought he was better than everyone. And while he still saw some people as nothing but a physical need or want, looking at you, Kishimoto, he started to slowly gain trust and care for others. The most tragic part is, just as Kurono was finally getting close bonds with those around him, and the confidence to shine in these missions, everything was taken from him. Kurono, unfortunately, had to lose everything to start anew. And that was all thanks to this arc. So, if you also hated how Kurono acted at the start, but had much more respect for him in the end, you got this arc to think. Just another reason it's my number one. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I really did enjoy Gantz in the end, while I do think there's some certain choices and aspects that I didn't like about this manga, and as much as I absolutely hated and just dreaded reading the ending, this is still one of my favorite manga I've ever read. But let me know if you agree or disagree with this list. What's your favorite arc in Gantz, and what's your least favorite? Surely it's gotta be the Catastrophe arc, right? Like, is that anybody's favorite arc? If it is, let me know. I'd actually be really interested to hear why you like certain arcs over others. But thank you for watching this video, and if you stuck around to the end, I love you. And thank you, and hopefully I'll see you around.